I'm Dr. Angela McBurdy of DoctorFlute.com, and today's flute tip is on why you should be practicing etudes every day. Etudes can be the bane of your existence, or they can be the gateway to really playing well. There's a lot to be learned with etudes, but there are a lot of people that don't really like practicing etudes, and I probably was one of them way back when. There was a time where I thought playing halfway through an etude was good enough. It eventually repeated, so who cares about that middle tricky section? I have since found that that was an erroneous thinking somewhere along the way. I had a really good teacher that told me how to practice etudes. And while she didn't say, here's reason 1, reason 2, and reason 3, how she had me practice these etudes and the things that she brought out of the etudes, out of me and out of the music, I fell in love with etudes. And I now espouse that you can learn everything about music through an etude. And I've written an article for Flute Talk magazine. I've done seminars and workshops on this very topic because it's near and dear to my heart. An etude can teach you a myriad of things if you let it. So many of the students that come and I have them play an etude before they know what my shtick is about etudes, and they come and they can play it through. Maybe, sometimes they can't, but I've got some really happening students and they play it through. And then I proceed to take the etude completely apart, and they realize, learning the notes is only one small part of that etude practice. Now, there are a lot of different etudes, and I think every teacher has their thing with which etudes they love and want their students to learn. But I think we all generally agree that Anderson etudes are at the top of the tier of etudes. They run the gamut from ones that I would do with a pretty intermediate 6th grader, maybe carrying all the way through to high school, and for more advanced players, you've got ones that you're going to play as a flute major, as in either undergrad, if really happening, and sometimes master's work. You're playing Opus Anderson 60. But that's just Anderson. There are Kohler etudes, and there are Drouet etudes, and. I want to give you some other reasons why you should practice etudes. Etudes can build your technique. Now, I have this list of things that are good for etudes, and the reason why, not good for etudes, but that are good for you as a flutist, that you pull out of your etudes. And I have this list because they changed my flute playing life. They really did. Etudes did. It wasn't playing solos that changed me as a flutist. It was etudes. Number 1, technique. We all know that. Etudes harp on an issue, generally. And they harp on it for line after line and sometimes page after page. You can have, Anderson etudes that are 2, 3, 4, 6 pages long etudes. And when the composer's targeting certain aspects of playing through that, you get it again and again and again and again. And that is a phenomenal way to build your technique if you're practicing it properly. And one way of practicing properly is another aspect of why you should practice etudes. So 1 is technique, 2 is to practice perfectly every time. Not allow yourself to practice, go back and fix, and then re-practice, because there's a way your brain works, that you create a pathway every time you learn something. And when you first learned it wrong, there's a path going the wrong way. And you then have to do it so many times in order to correct that wrong path, even if you only played it once. Practicing perfectly is very important, and that generally means take it slower. Don't allow yourself to have a mistake. Don't allow that to even happen one time. It takes a lot of discipline to do that, but it's very good, especially if you're planning on a flute player career. Start young, Do it, don't allow mistakes, and you'll be happy when you're performing on your first recital that you've learned how not to play mistakes even that first time. Another thing is articulation. Etudes have a myriad of articulations. Often it's the same articulation that they're working on in that particular etude. Placement of the tongue when you articulate is very important. Learn how to get tone at the same time as that articulation. Putting your tongue in the right spot, phenomenal to work on. We don't practice articulations enough. And part of technique practice that I have students use is I have them use 10 different articulations when they're learning a technical passage in the etude that they then can apply to their solo. Technique can be learned if you use your metronome and 10 different articulations. I use the articulations from Taffanel and Gobert's 17 grand exercises for the flute, and they use a lot of different articulations, but there's some others. Bennett has an exercise book that has articulations. They're slightly different. Practice them, whatever they are, and use them while you're learning your etude. It really helps to learn it. It's a strong way to practice. So articulation. How about tone? When you're looking at your etude, and I think Anderson are especially wonderful in this, there are melody notes. And playing those melody notes, you can work on tone. The one I just played before, right at the beginning of this, was Anderson's Opus 33, number 4. And there are definite melody notes. If that's not a beautiful melody, I don't know what is. And it's in an etude, not a solo. I think all Anderson etudes could be used in solo festivals. They're so phenomenal. But I would work on tone with a student. Just pull out those notes. How do you focus? This is a very middle register. And sometimes it's hard on a B and a C and a D to focus your tone and not have it be a little bit spread. So we'd work on tone here. Especially working on tone in tiny little package, because in the end you don't get to hold it. We have to do and then putting it back together and still getting that same exact tone. So that's another reason tone disappears often when you're playing an etude, because we're so bogged down with all the technique. Tone. Phrasing. When you find that melody and then you say, okay, now I have to find where's the cadence, where does this melody go? Play that melody like it's the most beautiful thing and it's the only thing that I'm going to play. I find where the cadence is, which is where I just ended there, and I can now play to that cadence and I can make it beautiful, so that when I've learned the technique and I've learned the articulation, now let me put it back together. All right, I think I brought out that melody. I phrased it. I don't want to do this. Because now that's not musical, okay? So this is all part of why you should be practicing etudes. Now, 2 more aspects which are a little bit less concrete, and one is concentration, learning to play with concentration, and being able to play through without stopping. Okay. So I was one of those, and still it can creep in if I'm not careful. When I perform, I allow my concentration to lapse. It wasn't something that was emphasized in my younger flute playing years, even through college, and I got away with not really learning how to concentrate. And it's something that has stuck with me, and I have to really work on it now. But etudes are where that happens. Concentration. When you start at the beginning of an etude, and I say this particular etude says to do it at 104, and I really like getting your etudes up to the tempo that it says. In these etudes, it pushes your technique beyond where you're comfortable, which means you've now moved to a new level of technique. When I start at the very beginning and say I'm at 80, that's all I've gotten. But I put the metronome on at 80, and I've learned it all the way through at 80, and now I have to play from the beginning to the end without making a mistake, without stopping, without letting a mistake throw me off. Then I have really learned it. It sometimes takes more stamina and concentration at 80 to play through the etude than it does at 104. And I'm blisteringly flying through that, doing all the things I can. I don't have time to think about, wait, is there an F sharp coming up, or did I miss that F sharp? When you play it slowly, there's more time for your mind to be thinking about what's going on, and sometimes that's not a good thing. So concentration, playing through, don't stop, and when you do have a mistake, don't correct it, move on, and still be perfect. All right, so those are a number of reasons why you need to be practicing etudes today. You can go to my website at drflute.com/downloads and find some etudes that you can download for free if you wish to, or there's many etudes out there, and if your teacher's having you work on them, great. If your teacher's not, I don't think there's any teacher that would say, I don't care what anybody else says, do not work on an etude. I think they wouldn't mind if you just added that on your own, even if they're not having you do it for whatever their reasons are, which are fine. But maybe you see the benefit to working on etudes and you add them to your own practice schedule. So enjoy working on etudes. They're not to be thought of as light and I can't stand them. Think of them as solos. Beautiful, wonderful solos that will make your playing rise to a new level. That's today's flute tip. If you like today's flute tip, press the like button, subscribe, comment below, and share it with your friends.